Number 5 on this list is the Gent Haunted House. As is customary on our top haunted places lists, pretty much every country has one home that's deeply haunted, and this is Belgium's. Culture Trip says, near the Dutch border there was a haunted house so popular it attracted ghost hunters from all over Europe. Its fame became its downfall, and the owner had it demolished for safety reasons in 2011. After all, old crumbled walls and moldy wood are a health hazard if downtrodden by enthusiastic photographers and are sure to annoy the locals. Besides safety reasons, the owner had his sights set on selling the property with or without the house. According to local legends, a German soldier was electrocuted near the house during World War I and his ghost remains in the home. He was joined by 4 Canadian soldiers during World War II. Their tank hit a mine on the property. There are several unsettling tales about the house. Cell phones suddenly had no service, watches stopped ticking, doors slammed shut, and curious visitors captured strange mist on their cameras. Whatever the truth, we may never know. Since it was demolished, the haunted house of Gent has turned into a legend. Now, even though the house is no longer there, the ghosts are still said to be in the area. The land here is deeply haunted with our respective World War I and World War II spirits. I find it really interesting that this home, or the ruins of it, aren't even haunted by a Belgian soldier at all, but literally by the ghosts of soldiers from different countries. I know that they died in unsettling and unnatural ways, and usually that's enough to leave a spiritual presence, but maybe the fact that it wasn't their home country added to this as well. Maybe it's harder to rest in peace when you're on foreign soil, when your family and loved ones are thousands of kilometers away. This is honestly just a theory that I was coming up with as I was writing this, so please comment down below if you think it might have some legs. Also, it should go without saying, but don't go visit this spot if you're ever in Belgium. Number 4 on this list is La Roche en Ardennes. We've already spoke about the haunted house. Well, another staple, especially for our European countries, is the haunted castle. The castle La Roche en Ardennes is definitely one of Belgium's most haunted. Culture Trip writes, in the castle of La Roche en Ardennes, there used to live a nobleman with a very beautiful daughter named Berthe. He figured the best way to get a son-in-law was to organize a tournament and give the winner Berthe's hand in marriage. The story doesn't actually mention what Berthe thought of all this. The Count of Montague participated fiercely, despite already being engaged to another woman, Countess Alix de Selm. He won every game, but near the end of the tournament, a mysterious small knight in black entered the contest. Said knight killed the Count and took Berthe to the bridal chamber. The next morning, the couple were found dead on the cliffs underneath the bridal chamber's window. The mysterious knight turned out to be Countess Alix de Selm, who had made a pact with the devil so she could kill her cheating fiancé and his wife-to-be. Ever since then, the Countess ghost haunts the castle. Well, that story honestly screams Shakespeare play to me if I've ever heard one. We got drama, betrayal, murder, it literally has everything. And usually when it has all of those elements, a ghost is left behind to haunt what remains. This story is no different, and the residents of this castle since then, plus any visitors who have come here, are constantly terrorized by the ghost of this countess. Apparently she doesn't hide her presence at all, but makes herself very known. She'll attack visitors and has even been reported as possessing people. Most of the time people make a full recovery from these possessions, but there have been reports where the trauma never goes away. Anyone who's willing to make a pact with the devil is certainly someone I want to stay away from, and being in ghost form makes that even worse. Number 3 on this list is the Sonian Forest. The Sonian Forest has a very strange phenomenon that occurs in it, which is locals believing it's haunted. Culture Trip says, Diogen is a strange fog that hovers in the Sonian Forest near Brussels. The fog has been described as greenish, but is also gray, orange, or white. What's consistent in the descriptions are small shadowy figures in the fog and the sound of laughing children. The name Diogen is a misspelling from the original name Diogen, which literally translates to the eyes. It's called the eyes because there's always something large in the fog that stares at you. There have been reports of the figures near the forest that dart in front of cars, and a bloody little handprint on the car window that leaves as soon as the fog is gone. A bloody little handprint. That is a big no thank you from me, guys. This sounds like something that has come directly out of a horror film and something that should be avoided at all costs. Nobody knows why this fog appears, but the general consensus is that some very powerful ghostly entity conjures it. Who this entity or entities is or why they reside in this forest is unknown, just that they're extremely powerful. Locals are also very scared of this spot, and it's become infamous for disappearances throughout the years. Unless you want to disappear in a greenish smoke, I'd avoid it at all costs. Number 2 on this list is the John McCrae Bunker. Ypres is a city full of history. You could almost say it's haunted by history. It's step into the quiet Essex Farm Cemetery by the canal to uncover a ghostly sight. The bunker is supposedly haunted by poet and physician John McCrae. Many ghost hunters who come here claim to hear echoes of voices, gunshots from World War I, or even witness the ghost of John McCrae and his friend Alex. The bunker is a memorial site in honor of John McCrae's memory. He wrote the famous poem In Flanders Fields for friend and fellow soldier Alex Hemmler. Hemmler died on the battlefield, and McCrae followed not long after, passing away from pneumonia. Some say that after hearing gunshots, you'll see flashes of Hemmler's ghost. Many European countries have at least one site that is haunted by the ghosts of soldiers, usually from World War I or World War II, and this bunker is Belgium's. It just so happens to be a very famous soldier though. Growing up in Canada and being Canadian, I've read and heard the poem In Flanders Fields many times. It honestly makes me really sad to hear this legend and know that John McCrae's soul has yet to find peace and still clings to earth in what I can only imagine is a horrible purgatory state. If you do ever go to this place, then make sure to show some respect to him, his friend Alex, and all the other soldiers who lost their lives here. Maybe that's what his soul needs to finally pass on. And finally, number 1 on this list is the Crypts of Laeken. These crypts are very close to the royal crypts of Belgium, but have been dubbed far creepier and far more haunted. Crypts are usually pretty creepy to begin with. One of the most haunted spots in the world is the Paris catacombs after all. These get especially riddled with ghosts though after they've been abandoned for a long period of time. And that's exactly what went down at the Crypts of Laeken. For 30 years these crypts were completely forgotten about and abandoned, and those that were kept here just rotted away underground. 30 years later, a cemetery was built over top of this place and people started coming back. When they went down there again though, it wasn't how they remembered it. Creatures, dark beasts with red glowing eyes and an appetite for apparently only flesh live down there now. These underground crypts that stretch super far used to be only the home to the dead, but now they're also the home to these demon things. I personally see no appeal to going down to an ancient abandoned underground crypt anyways, but throw on some werewolf wannabes and this is definitely a spot that I'd avoid. Number 5 on this list is Tranquil Sanatorium in British Columbia. Tranquil Sanatorium has quite an extensive and tragic history to it, which has caused its walls to be the home to many undead spirits. A sanatorium, if you weren't familiar, is an establishment which has the sole purpose of housing those with long-term illnesses and is often associated with tuberculosis. The one that we're talking about right now is no different. It was built in 1907 as a facility to treat people with tuberculosis. However, it didn't stay like this for very long. The purpose of the facility eventually changed to become an insane asylum. It acted as this mental institute for a while until finally becoming abandoned in the late 1980s. Due to its deep history with death, disease, mental illness, it's no wonder that the Tranquil Sanatorium is now deeply haunted. The layout of this facility screams something out of a Stephen King book. It has several buildings that are connected by poorly lit underground tunnels. The building itself looks all too eerie from the outside as well, with dirty cream colored walls that have seen far better days as rot and mold slowly devour them. Visitors of this place report feeling extremely uneasy. A common note for most people that visit is the presence of orbs, strange balls of light that flutter throughout the building and then disappear. Some people have reported seeing a ghostly apparition on the 6th floor. This ghost takes the form of a woman not older than 30. She appears to be crying and screaming. The tunnels are said to be particularly haunted. People have reported screams coming from nowhere, flashes of movement, menacing and animalistic groans that make you feel as if somebody is right behind you. Children can also be heard playing every now and again in some of the more open areas of the building. Clearly, this place's dark history has impacted it greatly, and just because physical humans decided to abandon it in the 80s doesn't mean that it was truly abandoned for good. Number 4 on this list is the Firkins House. The Firkins House is part of Fort Edmonton Park, which, you guessed it, is located in Edmonton, Alberta. Fort Edmonton Park is a little tourist attraction that has buildings from 1885, 1905, and 1920 to represent the homes of the time. One of the houses is the Firkins House. This home is interesting because during my research, I couldn't find any particular evidence of wrongdoings or tragic events at this home. In fact, for the most part, it seems like a pretty normal house. People have lived there before and no harm has befell them, but it seems seems that after they moved out and the home was donated, that's when things started to go a little bit haywire. There are reportedly 3 ghosts or demons that haunt this home, each one scarier and more dangerous than the next. The first one is the ghost of a beautiful floating woman who is dressed in all white. People have said that they've spotted her in the windows of the home looking out at them, or slowly drifting throughout the living room. The second one is the ghost of a little boy. The boy will appear to certain people looking extremely ill. It is currently unknown if this boy died in and around the area or what disease he is suffering from, but it is said that he resides in the home with the woman in white. The third being is by far the scariest of all 3. A ventriloquist dummy that will appear in the home or in the cupboards. This thing can move all by itself and talk by itself. It is very similar to the popular horror franchise Chucky, and it's said by some to be seeking to harm the living. I'm not sure if the ghost of the ventriloquist has taken over this dummy or if the dummy has taken on its own persona, but I definitely do not want to go anywhere where the primary residence is a demon puppet. Number 3 on this list is the 5 Fishermen Restaurant. This is a restaurant in Halifax, Nova Scotia, known for its exceptional oysters and also its ghostly inhabitants. The ground that this restaurant sits on wasn't always utilized for serving up fish and chips though. In fact, it has a very long history. In the early 1800s is when the building went up, and for a long time it acted as the town's only school. Nothing ghoulish or demonic about that. However, at around the turn of the century, the school moved and the building took on a new purpose. It became the mortuary for Halifax and made its dealings with the dead. Now, not every mortuary is going to become haunted, but this one had quite a lot to deal with over the years. In 1912, the unsinkable ship, the Titanic, sunk. It sunk roughly 640 kilometers off of the eastern shores of Canada, and therefore the closest places to assist with the rescue was these eastern provinces. Halifax acted as the leader in these rescue processes, and because of that, the mortuary had an onslaught of bodies of people whom had died on the ship. 5 years after that tragedy, Halifax incurred one of their own with the massive Halifax explosion. This was where a munitions ship exploded and it killed roughly 2,000 people just like that. This mortuary served as the primary designation for both of these incidents, and due to the unnatural deaths here, it makes sense that some spirits have clung on. Guests and employees alike have reported seeing ghosts all over this mortuary that turned restaurant. One of the dishwashers reported running out of the restaurant when he looked up from what he was doing and was staring directly at a ghost-like specter. The restaurant has attempted to have serious renovations done. However, I don't think that any amount of structural change will get these spirits to rest for good. Number 2 on this list is the Frank Slide. Now, even though the Frank Slide sounds like it could be a fun, popular dance move that takes over TikTok for a few weeks, it is far more morbid than that. On April 29th in 1903, in the mining town of Frank, which at that time was part of the Northwest Territories, but it is now a section of Alberta, there was a horrible tragedy. 110 million tons of limestone and rock came tumbling down in one of Canada's biggest landslides ever. This fell onto part of the town of Frank. Frank was located right next to Turtle Mountain, which after extensive mining had grown unstable. On April 29th, it all came crashing down and claimed the lives of 70 to 90 people. It is still to this day Canada's most deadly landslide to ever occur in history, and was a horrible tragedy that can only remind us how fleeting life can be. I think the craziest part about this landslide as well is that it wasn't just miners who were killed. Their wives, their families, all of them died at the hands of the Frank Slide. The remains of these bodies were never recovered either, as the damage from the slide was far too devastating. Where all of this happened is now a section of a town called Crow's Nest Pass, and over a century later, the ghosts of the dead still haunt the area. This place is somewhere where visitors have reported feeling very unsafe. They say that the overall feelings of uneasiness are almost too much to bear and that they have to leave. Cries, howls, screams, this can all be heard late at night as you're trying to sleep. Lanterns will be seen in the night walking around at the hands of unknown apparitions. It is basically a full ghost town of people who never deserved to die in the first place, all wanting to get a second just to feel their lives again as they were so unfairly ripped away from them. Definitely one of Canada's most horrific tragedies, and now home to one of its most haunted locations. Number 1 on this list is the Banff Springs Hotel. This hotel is located located in Banff, Alberta, and is truly one of the creepiest places that I've ever read about. Now, first off, I want to note the hotel itself looks gorgeous on the outside. The beautiful nature it is surrounded by is stunning, and the hotel gives me some serious Harry Potter Hogwarts vibes. However, when I say that this place is surrounded by nature, I really mean it. It is totally out on its own, with no other buildings in sight at all. The secluded site has been around for 132 years and has housed its fair share of visitors. Some of these visitors have had some incredible stays. I mean, when you look it up online, the hotel has a 4.7 Google rating, so I mean, it's pretty freaking good. Some of the guests, though, they never checked out. In the 1920s, a couple was set to have their wedding at this hotel. On the day of the ceremony, though, the bride, while she was walking down one of the hotel's beautiful marble staircases, tripped and fell, smacking her head on her descent and dying on the spot. This bride's spirit is one of the most notable sightings people have had when they're staying at this hotel. It's said that they often see a phantom in a wedding dress ascending and descending the stairs very quickly. She's also been seen in the ballroom dancing alone, potentially dreaming of the dance that she wanted so desperately to have with the husband that she never got to marry. In 1975, a longtime bellman of the hotel, Sam, died there. Since then, sightings of Sam have been pretty consistent. One story details how two women lost their room key and called the front desk to go and get it. The front desk person sent someone to go and open their room for these ladies. When that person had got there, though, the ladies were already in the room and said that another bellman had let them in. They described Sam to a T when they spoke about the bellman who helped them out. Instances like this have occurred time and time again at the hotel, with many people believing his spirit is still working there. Finally, with this hotel, you have room 873. Room 873 is rumored to be the home of a gruesome murder. One evening, a family was staying there, and the father, for some unknown reason, lost his mind, murdering his family and himself. After completely refurbishing the room, the hotel put it back in service, but now people who have stayed there report hearing the screams and the cries as if they were still dying. If you have to stay at this hotel, definitely avoid room 873. Number 5 on this list is Villa Paula. This haunted place is located in Miami and has quite the interesting guest in the backyard. Thrillist says this stately white mansion was originally constructed as the Cuban consulate in the mid-1920s, home to Consul Domingo Millard and his wife, Paula. The Cuban-born Paula was known to spend her days playing piano and drinking Cuban coffee until she died from complications from a leg amputation in 1932. Legend has it that Domingo interred his late wife in a sarcophagus laid in the backyard. The sarcophagus is still there now, covered by ficus tree roots and nearly impossible to reach. Whether or not it actually contains her mortal remains is debatable at best, but reports of her ghost persist. It's said her ghost is in different rooms there, says History Miami's Dr. Paul George. People who've lived at Villa Paula since have had existential kinds of experiences. Among them, phantom coffee smells and piano playing, a one-legged woman roaming about as well. So there is a literal sarcophagus just chilling in this person's backyard. Can you imagine having that just show up on the house listing? I'd be like, no, we are not okay with that. I'm kind of surprised that no one has gone to go deal with the sarcophagus before. I mean, you can't just leave this thing down there like that and expect the ghost to just go away. I would imagine that Paula's spirit is probably tied to the sarcophagus, and in turn, it's tied to the area. Granted, I do kind of understand why no one wants to dig it up. Think about all the crazy stuff that's happened with the pyramids. You dig up this sarcophagus and you might end up being cursed for life, which is obviously something that nobody wants. But now we're left in this awkward place where we can't get rid of the ghost, but at the same time can't live here either. That's why I'm recommending to all of you watching, just avoid Villa Paula altogether. Number 4 on this list is the Blue Anchor Pub. So this is an interesting one because this pub didn't actually start in Florida. Thrillist says this pub was built in 1840s London during Jack the Ripper times, so it should be no surprise that it's haunted. The story goes that the bar was raised in London, but its wooden interiors were sent to New York City and then onto this sleepy Florida town in 1996. Little did anyone know that the pub's original elements came with the ghost of Bertha Starkley, a cheating wife who was murdered by her husband. Today, she can be heard rattling pots, knocking things over, and wailing in the middle of the night at the Blue Anchor. Every night around 10 p.m., the time that she was murdered, Bertha likes to remind everyone she's still here, so the current owners ring the ship's bell to scare her away. So, first thing, I've never actually heard of that before, where they take a building from one continent and then just decide to move it over to another continent. This bar must look pretty cool on the inside to go to all that trouble though. Obviously, this was a bit of a mistake, and everyone would have been better served if we relocated this thing straight to the dump. Bertha doesn't care if it's in London or America or anywhere. As long as the structure of this pub is still intact, her ghost will still be floating around, which makes it very hard to enjoy a night out at this place. Like, imagine drowning several pints, going to take a piss, and then getting ambushed by some 1800s ghost in the bathroom with your pee-pee hanging out. Like, I don't know if I'd ever be able to recover from that, folks. Number 3 on this list is St. Augustine's Lighthouse. Ah yes, the haunted lighthouse, a true classic. Thrillist says St. Augustine's iconic lighthouse is a Florida landmark built in 1874. But climb up its 219 steps, and it's not just the views that will take your breath away. First, there's the ghost of Joseph Andrew, the original lighthouse keeper who fell to his death while painting the 165-foot tower. Then there are the Pity's two daughters, who were playing with a building cart when it broke loose and slid into the nearby bay, drowning them both. While the girls giggle and run up and down the lighthouse steps, Joseph has been reported smoking cigars at the top of the lighthouse, keeping watch over his forever home. You know guys, if I had to be a ghost, then being Joseph wouldn't be the worst. I get to look out at the pretty scenery at the top of my lighthouse where hardly anyone bothers me, and I get to smoke cigars all day. Like, obviously I wouldn't want to be a ghost, but if I had to be, then this wouldn't be that bad. Either way, I'm not a ghost now. I am very much a human being, and if I want to stay a human being, then I recommend avoiding this place. It can obviously be very jarring to see two little ghost girls running around, and even though all of these ghosts are supposed to be pretty chill, we know that the paranormal can be unpredictable. I'm sure that there are tons of other non-haunted Florida lighthouses around if you're really pining for a good view. Number 2 on this list is Fort East Martello. If you don't like dolls, then you really won't like this one, guys. Thrillist says if there is one rule all Floridians follow, it's do not mess with Robert the doll. The 4-foot figurine has terrorized anyone who hasn't taken him seriously since he was gifted to artist Robert Jean Otto in 1904. Otto blamed any mischievous act around him on Robert the doll, effectively coining the oft-repeated Robert did it mantra. The doll currently holds court inside Fort East Martello, where he lives inside a glass case surrounded by a constant soundtrack of haunting xylophone music. The room evokes a heavy air immediately upon entering, and the walls are papered with apology notes from cocky tourists who've dared cross the world's most haunted plaything. Even the Prince of Darkness himself, Ozzy Osbourne, felt Robert's wrath when he suffered a series of health mishaps shortly after dissing the doll on his reality show. I don't like dolls, folks, especially the haunted variety, so this entry obviously had to make the list. Clearly it curses you after you see it because people literally have to come back here and ask for its forgiveness. I don't know if the notes work or not, but I guess that's all you can do when you're dealing with a haunted doll. Hopefully this doll can just chill out and stop haunting people, but in the meantime, I just flat out avoid going to this place in Florida altogether. And number 1 on this list is Casa Monica Resort and Spa. It really sucks that this place is so haunted because it's truly beautiful. Thrillist says St. Augustine's fanciest hotel is also its most haunted. In fact, this 5-star Mediterranean revival haunt is a hotbed of spectral activity. Children are heard running along along the 4th floor, but no one is there. The radio in the Ponce de Leon suite randomly comes on, but no one's there. Guests of room 411 wake up to people staring at them, but no one's there. But it's the 3-story Flagler suite high in the tower that's most haunted. Maids have seen a child's handprint appear on the 1st floor bathroom mirror, and after knocking, one heard a man say, "We've been expecting you," from an empty bedroom. Its spookiest claim to fame, however, is the male ghost staring out of the top tower window. He's believed to be the ghost of one of 2 people, either Franklin Smith, the architect who built the hotel, or Henry Flagler, the man who purchased it. I personally don't care if it's the architect, the man who purchased it, or God. Anyone who says, "I've been waiting for you as I enter an empty bedroom," it's not the type of individual I want to be around. Also, where are these children coming from and what are those sounds? Okay, so you want to tell me a scary story where the architect of the building fell in love with his work and then when he died, his ghost stayed here. Alright, fine, I can buy that, I can believe that, but like, what are the children doing here? What do they have to do with this place and the architect? Maybe this is just one of those spots where it doesn't matter what happened here, it doesn't matter what will happen here in the future, it's just always destined to be haunted.
In at number 5 we have Eldridge Hotel. The Eldridge Hotel is a historic building located in downtown Lawrence, Kansas. The building is named after Shayla Eldridge, who was a prominent anti-slavery individual who lived here in the 1800s. The building became an apartment complex in the 1970s, but there was a strong desire by the city to see it open as a hotel, and a group of investors contributed, as well as the city of Lawrence, into industrial revenue bonds to make this dream a reality. In the later 1980s it opened as a hotel. A popular story has circulated about the hauntings in this hotel, with the locals, employees and guests that the ghost is that of Shayla Eldridge, who haunts the halls to this day. Many claim that because the Eldridge House's original cornerstone is located in room 506 and his spirit will manifest in that room and also roam around the building. People who have stayed in this room have claimed to witness breath marks on recently cleaned mirrors, doors opening and shutting on their own and lights turning on and off by themselves. Others claim that the hotel's elevator is also haunted by a different spirit who is known to open and shut the elevator doors on the 5th floor. The 5th floor is said to contain a portal to the spirit world. A popular photograph was taken during the 1980s that clearly shows a ghost-like figure in the building's elevator. Many other photographers have mentioned having unexplained technical difficulties with their cameras when near the elevator. The story of the hotel and the hauntings of Eldridge was the inspiration for the movie The Demon's Shadow, and the hotel was featured in the series My Ghost Story and has been depicted in many writings. Many believe the rich history has resulted in the amount of paranormal activity. In at number 4, Midland Railroad Hotel. The Midland Railroad Hotel is known for serving the largest steak around, and if you can finish all of it, you get it for free. But it has a sinister, haunting history. It was first a popular train stop in the 1890s, then known for being the location for the movie Paper Moon, where many scenes were filmed at this hotel in 1973. Since then, it's gone through fires, the Great Depression, and plenty of renovations. It is now owned by the Wilson Foundation, has been back in business since 2003, and is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Not only is this hotel known for these interesting things, it's most known now for the paranormal activity that lurks around the hotel. The most famous ghost is that of an orphan girl that haunts the 3rd floor, who knocks on doors, runs through the hallways, and even jumps on your bed, leaving little footprints. A ghost hunting team has experienced this spirit and have recorded sounds of the little girl. Another 3rd floor room is where a sheriff was said to have been lynched, and sometimes the door is unable to be unlocked even by the master key. Ghostly figures have been seen at the top of the stairs, and things in the kitchen have flown distances suddenly without being touched by anyone. There are also many ghostly figures that are seen on the staircases, and have left many to believe that the fire that took many lives back in 1902 are the results of some of these paranormal presences. The owner of the Midland Railroad Hotel, Melinda Merrill, says that there's not one employee who hasn't seen or felt something, and you can definitely feel a presence when you enter the hotel. In at number 3 we have Hotel Josephine. The Hotel Josephine is considered by many to be the most haunted hotel in Kansas. It was built in 1890, located in the city of Holton, and is the oldest consecutive operating hotel west of the Mississippi River. The history of the hotel is rich but also very haunted. The hotel was built by A.D. Walker and was named after his daughter Josephine. When it was built, she was only 4 months old and she attended the local elementary school and graduated Kansas University. Her graduation photo is hung in the front parlor, above the antique piano, and according to the current hotel manager, Tracer Fox, her spirit is just one that is wandering the hotel. Tracer Fox has expressed his belief in the spirits when he first stayed at the hotel. He was woken up suddenly at 3:30 a.m. and his bed was moving. He figured there was an earthquake, but when nothing in the news confirmed it, he knew it was a spirit. His mother came and stayed in a room across from him and experienced the exact same thing he did with no explanation for it. They had been skeptics before these happenings, but they are both now firm believers. Other guests staying at the hotel have similar stories, as well as experiencing hearing strange sounds, laughter, footsteps, and seeing shadows. It has been expressed that spirits can be found on each floor. One of the most haunted rooms in the hotel is the Buffalo Room, where shadows are often seen and photographed in the mirrors around the room, as well as the Carrie Nation Room. According to historical documents, a woman hanged herself in the bathroom of that room, and many guests staying there have come out of the room clutching their necks and having a hard time breathing. The hotel has brought several famous guests over the years, including former US President Grover Cleveland, who stayed there in between his 2 terms as president, along with Carrie Nation, Robert Louis Stevenson, Charles Curtis, Kirstie Alley, John Sullivan, Sam Rayburn, and Harry Langdon. Due to the amount of paranormal activity and active spirits in this hotel, the hotel hosts several paranormal and haunted events throughout the year, and many ghost hunters come to Holton to check out the more than century-old hotel. It's also been featured in many television shows, including Ghost Tours of Kansas and Haunted Rooms America. Coming in at number 2, we have McIntyre Villa. The McIntyre Villa is one of the unusual and historic houses built in the city of Atchison. It was built in 1889 for John McIntyre, a wealthy manufacturer of harnesses and saddles. He did a great deal of business with wagon trains plying the overland trails. John McIntyre's first wife, Alice, died in 1892. He married his second wife, Anna Conlon, a widow with 3 sons, and after John's death in 1902, Anna continued living in the home until her death in 1916. During her ownership, the house was home to many of her relatives, with lots of children as well. Around 1925, Anna's brother, Judge Charles J. Conlon, a prominent Atchison lawyer, and his family made the villa their home. In 1952, the McIntyre Villa was purchased by Miss Isabel Altus, a retired professional violinist and eccentric. She lacked the financial resources to be able to restore the home, and shortly before her death, she sold the home to George Gerardi in 1969, who started to rehabilitate the old estate. Many people, past and present, who have lived in and visited the home have experienced many paranormal experiences. There have been figures being seen in windows when no one is home, lights turning on and off in the tower which doesn't have electricity, a speaker getting thrown off the counter, and boxes mysteriously moving on their own. Sounds of slamming doors throughout the night, footsteps walking down the hallway on the 2nd floor throughout the night, the feeling of being watched, drastic temperature changes, voices, the scent of a woman's perfume, and the hunt of cigarettes. The number of encounters and confirmed hauntings seen and heard around this home is crazy, and it's considered to be one of the most active paranormal homes in all of the US. The amount of activity in this home makes it a hub for investigators, mediums, psychics, and ghost hunters. They offer ghost tours of the home, and you can stay overnight to try and encounter these spirits. And finally, in at number 1, we have Sally House. The Sally House is said to be the most haunted place in Kansas. This home was built in the turn of the century and is located in the city of Atchison. After being built, the home was bought by the Atchison physician who worked from his home. The front served as an office space and examination rooms, and the upstairs is where the doctor and his family lived. One day, a frantic mother arrived at the home carrying her young daughter Sally. The child had collapsed from severe abdominal pain. The doctor diagnosed appendicitis, but there was no time to delay surgery. Sally unfortunately passed away on the operating table. For years after, many believe Sally stayed to haunt the home, and the haunting grew infamous in 1993 when the house was rented to a young couple. It started when the couple's dog would growl at nothing and make even louder growls when near the upstairs nursery. Things began to take a violent turn when fires broke out in the house and a series of sinister attacks on the husband began. The former operating area would feel extremely cold, and objects would visibly move when the young man came close. He could feel scratches scratches on his chest and abdomen, but the ghost never attacked the wife or baby. Not only did the former residents experience the paranormal activity, but locals and other visitors of the home have experienced objects moving on their own, mysterious coldness, physical touches, video and investigative equipment that stopped working, trained guide dogs refusing to enter the nursery, and unexplained scratches or bruising on their bodies during and after their visits. Psychics have visited the home, and many have confirmed the presence of spirits in the home and have even communicated with them, and many have entered as skeptics and left believers. Due to the number of experiences in the home, it's gained a lot of media coverage from television channels including A&E, the Travel Channel, the Discovery Channel, and the Sci-Fi Channel. The home is not currently occupied but holds many guided ghost tours for both daytime and even overnight visits for the ghost lovers and paranormal investigators. Beware though, because a waiver is required due to the potential for personal injury, but no serious injuries have been reported since the last tenant in 1993.
Number 5 on this list is the Myrtles Plantation. The Myrtles Plantation is located in St. Francisville, Louisiana, and is home to a plethora of ghosts. The plantation was established in 1796 and is said to have been built on an ancient burial grounds. These burial grounds have obviously contributed to the deep spiritual presence that it has, and the reports that there are 12 different ghosts that currently occupy the space. However, the spirit that is most commonly seen wandering the place wasn't from these burial grounds at all, but an incident that occurred at the plantation many years ago. Chloe, a slave of the plantation in the early 1800s, was eavesdropping one day on a conversation between the family who owned the plantation. The punishment was swift and drastic, and they cut off one of Chloe's ears so that she would never do it again. Chloe obviously didn't take too kindly to this, and even though she knew it would most likely mean her death, wanted to retaliate. She did so by poisoning a birthday cake, which in turn killed 2 of the owner's daughters. For this, she was put to death and executed. However, it is said that Chloe's spirit still wanders the ground to this day and is the most commonly spotted ghost at this plantation. She will be wearing a turban to cover up her ear that was chopped off when she was alive. If you ever see this ghost, people say that you immediately get filled with a deep and solemn depression that hangs over you for quite some time. People speculate that the deep depression that you feel after encountering her may have been the way that she felt while she was alive. Number 4 on this list is the Whaley House. The Whaley House is located in San Diego, California, and is said by some to be the most haunted home in all of the United States. The ghost who haunts the home is not your standard phantom. In fact, it is the spirit of a convicted high-profile robber from the 1850s. Yankee Jim had a good run of thievery, but was inevitably unable to avoid the gallows and was hung off of the back of a wagon in 1852. Thomas Whaley was at that hanging and watched as Yankee Jim died. This did not deter him though from purchasing the very land where it happened. It was at this spot that he proceeded to build what is known today as the Whaley House. It didn't take very long at this home though before the Whaleys quickly realized the errors of their ways. It is said that it took only a few weeks of living there before they started to notice strange ongoings at the home. Doors would slam without anyone around them at all. They may even lock themselves as well with you inside. Footsteps could be heard moving around the home at all hours throughout the day. These footsteps were large, the sound of a big boot attacking the ground, the sound of Yankee Jim. In the entirety of that time the family owned the home for over 100 years, there was never a time that they said they weren't haunted in this house. After the home was donated and turned into a museum, the sightings became more exaggerated. Different phantoms started appearing, screams were heard, items would float from place to place. A parapsychologist even reported seeing a phantom dog run through the home at one point. Frankly, I don't believe all of these secondary claims. It kind of feels like people's imaginations ran with the idea of having a haunting once it turned into a museum. But I do believe the ghost of Yankee Jim to be a very real thing. If you do go to this home, make sure you have no valuables with you, or Yankee Jim may just claim them for himself. Number 3 on this list is Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. We just spoke about the most haunted home in America, so it's only fitting that we talk about the most haunted cemetery in America. The Bachelor's Grove Cemetery is located in Chicago, Illinois, and has potentially the widest array of ghost stories that I've ever heard of. It's not the biggest graveyard in the world. In fact, it doesn't even operate as one anymore. It was established in the 1840s and practically abandoned in the mid-1900s. There were rumors that the mafia used to use this place as a spot to dump bodies, as it's reasonably secluded and nobody could see them do it. Its secluded nature, rumors tied to the mafia, and the inevitable vandalism that it did receive could all be reasons why it's haunted today. Now, I was talking about the mafia and gangsters. Well, one of the biggest ghostly sightings at this cemetery is actually a gangster car. The graveyard is right next to a road, and people driving down that road have reported seeing the distinct image of a vehicle in the middle of the road resembling a mafia vehicle. People have actually fully swerved off of the road and crashed their own cars, and then later realized that nothing was there at all. Others have seen a whole farmhouse appear in the graveyard, but when they tried to go to it, it completely disappeared. Cars and farmhouses, these are big apparitions, and lead me to believe that the spiritual presence in this cemetery has got to be really strong. In 1991, the Chicago Sun released a very famous picture of the graveyard in which there appears to be the figure of a woman sitting on a gravestone, all in white. The photographer behind this picture claims that there wasn't anybody there when he took the picture, and it only came up on the camera. With over 100 ghostly sightings in this cemetery, I do believe that it's claimed to be the most haunted cemetery in America. It's well earned. Number 2 on this list is Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Waverly Hills Sanatorium is located in Louisville, Kentucky, and was home to thousands of deaths. At least 8,000 if we're really trying to be exact. The sanatorium was built in 1910, and the main patients that it dealt with were victims of the White Plague. Back then, there was no known cure, and many of the patients died to this disease. That wasn't the only way that they died here, though. It is believed that doctors would use these dying patients as guinea pigs for some drugs or treatments that they were developing. However, oftentimes, this would just result in the patient's death. After the White Plague had largely been dealt with, the space was transformed into a geriatric hospital. The liberties that the doctors and the nurses took, they got even worse when this happened. Electroshock therapy was utilized. Major injustices and mistreatments were done on the patients from the nurses. It really all went bad. In the 1980s, this spot was shut down for good, but by that point, the damage had already been done. Now Waverly Hills is one of the most haunted locations in America. People say that there are constant footsteps all over the place, even though there's hardly anyone in the building. Doors will slam and lock when no one's even close to them. Phantoms and shadows will stalk people throughout the hallways of the building, seemingly waiting for a moment to strike. Screams and shrieks of former patients can be heard ringing throughout the corridors of the building. Many ghosts haunt the death tunnel, which was a place where they used to move the bodies of the dead. In room 502, there have been reported attacks on people, where they felt their bodies seize up and get thrown to the ground. In that room, 2 nurses committed suicide. Apparently one of them jumped out of the window and the other one hung themselves because they couldn't live with the ongoing death that happened in this place. This building has seen way too many horrible things in its existence to just be a building anymore. Feel free to look it up on the internet if you're interested, but don't go visit this in person. Number 1 on this list is the Eastern State Penitentiary. This prison is located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and when you hear the types of things that went on at this place, it's no wonder that it's haunted as badly as it is. The facility was built in 1829 and was in service for roughly 150 years. Now, if this place had a motto, then it would have to be something about solitude. That was the theme at Eastern State Penitentiary: being alone. If you were a prisoner there, then you had your very own tiny little cell where you lived alone, ate alone, slept alone, and just existed alone. The thing is, it wasn't just the cell either. If you had to go to the washroom or leave the cell for any reason, then the guards would put a bag over your head and they would walk you to wherever you're going. The only thing that you will ever know if you go to this place is your cell. The mental strain that that amount of solitude would have had on those prisoners, it would have been insane. This wasn't the only form of punishment though. There were reports of chaining your tongue to your wrist and leaving you like that. They would dunk you in water and then they would hang you outside in the winter until your body literally froze. And honestly, there was a lot more horrible things that they did too that I don't even want to get into. Either way, due to all the horrors, due to all the death, due to all the atrocities that went on in these walls, the prison now boasts its fair share of ghosts. It is currently open to the public, however, I would not recommend going and checking it out. They have various cell blocks that are all known for different ghostly experiences. One of them has extreme echoing voices of laughter as if somebody was going insane. One of them has what it feels like evil shadowy figures jumping from wall to wall. The bloodthirst that these figures have is reportedly palpable. Another cell block has the visions of the dead faces that appear battered and bloodied right in front of you. Gary Johnson, who works to upkeep the prison, had a harrowing experience here before. He was opening up a cell block to clean it when all of a sudden his body stopped functioning and he was completely paralyzed but also totally aware. He felt as if spirits were invading his body and hurting his mind as he was frozen. Finally he was released and ran from the scene. This prison is haunted to its core and it must be avoided at all costs.
Number 5. Chateau de Montségur, a petite and quaint fortress in southern France, sitting atop a 170-meter drive uphill. Its ruins now nothing but rock and rubble, but once a safe house for the Cathars. The Cathar vision of the universe was dualist, in that good and light confronts evil and darkness. Right? Pretty straightforward. Very Jedi of them. This belief led them to follow a very disciplined way of life. Before, of course, they were decimated from the Catholic Church, initiated by Pope Innocent III. Innocent, huh? The ruins nicknamed now Satan's Synagogue. Yeah, nice and light right off the top, huh, Kyle? Described as one of the last Cathar castles and has been listed as a monument historique by the French Ministry of Culture. Cathar, from Greek meaning pure. These people were devout. In 1233, the site became the seat and head of the Cathar Church. The fort roughly housed about 500 people during this time. In 1242, a military of about 10,000 troops fought against the castle that was held up by only 100 Cathars. So like very Jedi all of a sudden. The siege lasted 9 months. Until 2 years later, the castle finally surrendered. North of 200 Cathars were burned in a giant bonfire, unless they renounced and changed their faith, some taking the Cathar vow just weeks before this. Those who renounced the Cathar faith were allowed to leave, but the castle itself destroyed. The field below, now famously known to have been where hundreds of men and women were burned alive. The apparent bonfire that happened sparked a curse from the Cathar peoples. Legends of these ruins say any person who strays off the marked footpaths of these ruins and loses their footing will drop off of every side of the citadel in the sky. Sounds more like a metaphor to me than a curse. Number 4. Kalaupapa. In 1866, during the reign of Kamehameha V, Hawaiian officials passed a law designating this island the official site for patients affected with leprosy. Kalaupapa, a small peninsula in the north shore of Molokai, has quite a bitter and spooky history. The king exiled those who contracted Hansen's disease here, noting it was the ideal spot secluded and surrounded by the highest cliffs in the world. The peninsula served as a natural outdoor prison, accessible only by one steep path by foot or boat to shore. About 1,200 families were exiled to quarantine here. At the time, the disease wasn't really understood, believing it to be very incurable. Whisked off and locked away amid paradise in total isolation. No amenities, no buildings, or even potable water. Known by historians who visit it as, quote, the pit of hell itself. And apparently the most cursed place on earth. Yeah, I didn't know that. With its grim history of loneliness, despair, and death, it's not really surprising at all that Kalaupapa is said to be one of the most haunted places in all of Hawaii. This island was basically a death sentence for those on it. Shackles, cages, caves. Sounds about right to be haunted by the afterlife. Number 3. The Vanishing Village. Way up north, a village named after a bountiful, massive freshwater lake in Canada's Nunavut. 1932. A Canadian fur trapper and explorer went to the village of Anjakuni Lake. The people's known there for their markets of elaborate fish and extensive wine. This village was a staple for most on the map. Joe LaBelle, a well-known fur trapper and well-known in the village, had an otherworldly sight when he arrived. He arrived and sensed something was a little wrong, a little too quiet, too foggy. He found that the village was completely emptied and deserted, even though there were lots of signs of life still present. Campfires blazing, pots still boiling, doors were even open, and food out waiting to be served. Thousands of Anjakuni villagers had simply vanished. He sent a telegraph to the closest RCMP office and told them about his account. And here's the scary part. They launched an official investigation which was never solved. They took a testimony from another trapper and his 2 sons who said they saw a large cylindrical object transform into a bullet shape before flying directly over Anjakuni Lake. At the village, the police found the kayaks were still on the beach, meals still in the early stages of rot, and apparently the headstones were even stacked neatly in piles on either side of the graves. Okay? To this day, there's no proper explanation for this mass disappearance of people and the hundreds of empty graves. Number 2. Skeleton Lake. Deep within the Himalayas of India lays the bay of an ancient lake, shrouded by an ancient mystery, Rupkund Lake, famously known as Skeleton Lake. It was rediscovered by the British Forest Rangers in 1942, and what they found was pretty jarring. Hundreds of ancient human skeletons found at the edge of the lake. Investigations led some to think that this was a catastrophe of some sort, or the remains of a legendary event where a group was suddenly killed in a violent storm around the 9th century. Nope. 3 different groups of people died here all at different times. It's not located on or near a trade route. No evidence of any ancient bacteria pathogen, ruling out diseases. Yeah, this one's really weird. One group of people had genetics to present-day South Asia, while the other group related to the people of Central Europe. And finally, a group particularly from the Greek island of Crete. But how? All here? They found the bones and deaths were genetically separated in time by as much as 1,000 years difference. Wooden artifacts, iron spearheads, even slippers and jewelry were found by the National Geographic team who studied 30 skeletons in 2003. Skin still on some of them. Ugh. 300 people have been found so far. Legend goes, Parvati, a supreme goddess, cursed the kingdom, unleashing drought and disaster upon them. She sent down a blizzard of hail and whirlwind which swept the people into the lake. Their skeletons are a warning to those who disrespect the goddess. I mean, maybe. The skeletons are visible in the clear water of the shallow lake during 1 month when the ice melts. That's terrifying. I'm gonna chicken out right now and just never visit this place. Just show up and get Jack Skellingtoned? Are you kidding me? No way, dude. And number 1, the City of Screams. Top of my relaxing trip list, Golgotha City, Afghanistan. Peaceful once as it was the capital of the Gorid people, until Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire seized it in about the 12th century. Apparently legend goes its ruler, Jalaluddin Mangburnu, fought back and apparently killed Khan's grandson in battle. Yeah, probably not a good idea. In 1221, Khan sent his 15-year-old Mudu Khan here to claim and siege, who in turn was shot and killed with an arrow, precipitating the siege of Bamyan. At first, the city held strong, but was apparently sold out by the ruler's daughter, who, according to legend, betrayed the castle's secret entrance, sharing and consorting with the enemy. Expecting to be rewarded, her and her people were unfortunately slaughtered, and the ruins cursed, of course. The Russians, the Taliban, and the Americans have all used these ruins as fighting posts over the years, as this place hasn't been lived in since. But through them is apparently very haunted, the ruins subject to those who still hear the screams of the fallen. Yeah. Terrifying. Haunting sounds of screaming and warfare are echoed here, thus giving it its famous name of the City of Screams. Dark horseback figures to even full-on uniformed specters are seen atop the rubble. Yeah, I just say we just avoid this place completely and just kind of back away slowly out of respect, you know?
Number 5, the Castle of Good Hope. Coming up first on our list of haunted hotspots is going to be the Castle of Good Hope in Cape Town, South Africa. It was first built in the 17th century by the Dutch East India Company, so you just know there's bad vibes there to begin with. It's the oldest colonial building in South Africa, and if you believe the local legends, it's allegedly one of the most paranormal spots in the country. The first reported paranormal sighting from the castle came from 1915, when a tall, pale, mysterious man dressed in black, he sounds familiar, whose attire didn't match the era at all, country or anything, appeared seemingly out of nowhere, walking alongside one of the castle's ramparts before vanishing as soon as he appeared. Now that's pretty weird, definitely, not quite enough to label a place haunted, but it was a one-off incident, right? Well, in 1947, this same strange man kept appearing, making regular visits for weeks on end. He'd be jumping off the castle's walls, seemingly plummeting to his doom, only to reappear again to do it all again. I gotta be honest, he sounds kinda sick, all things considered. Sounds like he just wants to bungee jump and vibe out as a ghost. Another popular story from the castle is that of former governor, one Peter Giesbert van Noot. Whew, you try saying that 5 times fast. He passed in the castle on the 23rd of April, 1728, the same day he had sentenced 7 army deserters to the death sentence. The legend has it that one of these soldiers hexed him and demanded he face him and watch the execution. Van Noot was apparently a bit squeamish and refused the invitation, and later that day was found dead at his desk, slumped over. And some believe his ghost still wanders the castle's halls. And there were more ghosts I couldn't even fit into this one video because there's so many hauntings from this place. I recommend you read up about it afterwards. And if you want way more videos about haunted spots, ghosts, goblins, aliens, cryptids, conspiracies, true stories, fake stories, we got all of that and then some. So click through on Top 5 Scary, find something to watch, something to fall asleep to, I don't judge. Stay subscribed, stay scared, but stay watching this video. We worked hard on it. Alright, moving on through. Number 4, the Chernobyl Exclusion Zone. Maybe this one's a bit of an obvious pick, but our next entry is going to be the infamous Chernobyl Exclusion Zone, the real-life post-apocalyptic wasteland of Pripyat. Have you ever heard the word Kalaupapa? Maybe not. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. I only learned this word today. But it refers to a feeling of seeing an atmosphere that you know is supposed to be populated, but isn't. And I feel like that word definitely applies to Chernobyl, or like liminal is a very good feeling too. It is kind of a liminal space because you see all of these buildings and you can imagine a life happening there, but it's frozen in time. The Chernobyl blast would be enough to cover a whole video and then some. I heard there was a very good HBO series about it. And trying to cover it in under 2 minutes would be foolhardy, so here's the super quick Cole's Note versions. Is that a late night safety test simulating a station blackout power failure ended up starting a huge blast, which eventually threw radioactive material that blew all over Pripyat and the surrounding areas, causing everyone to have to pick up everything and evacuate, never to return. 50,000 people used to live here, and now it's a ghost town. And yeah, I'm not gonna lie, I only know that line from COD 4. All gillied up, best level in the series. That one's just for my gamers out there. Now you can actually visit Chernobyl, although they don't really recommend you do. You know, it's not a fun hotspot for tourism or anything. People who delve into the zone for recreation, or to find things, are called stalkers, named after the Tarkovsky movie of the same name, revolving around visits to a strange zone, and not the video game Stalker, where bandits raid the apocalyptic zone, although you would be forgiven for thinking that. Visiting the zone is no easy task. For one, it's recommended that you absolutely go with a guide or someone who knows the area very well, and then come all the requirements. You mustn't touch anything whatsoever. No vegetation. There are wild dogs that live in Chernobyl, and they're very cute, but you can't touch them at all because there could be traces of radiation in their fur. You have to wear an outfit that covers as much as possible. Big boots, you know, don't show up in your sunners and flip-flops. They recommend wearing a mask too to avoid inhaling any dust or, you know, any of the radioactive particles that could still be floating around in the air. Real life radiation, not half as fun as the comic books. You are very unlikely to come out of here with any web-slinging superpowers. More likely just gonna have a bad cough and, you know, your family's gonna get real sad. You're asked not to enter any buildings because some are so degraded that they could collapse literally at any minute with the wrong pressure applied somewhere, and then you're just another tragedy. Now, I've never been, but from pictures, Chernobyl genuinely seems unreal, like it's not part of the world, you know? It seems like it's something out of a movie or a video game, but it's this harrowing, soul-crushing reflection of our reality, a stark warning on the dangers of nuclear power, and a grim reminder that your life as you know it can be upended forever in but a moment. Number 3, Mausoleum of the First Qin Emperor, Qin Shi Huang. The tomb of former Emperor of China, Qin Shi Huang, is notable for many reasons. Maybe it was because in 1974, when farmers from the Shaanxi province were digging a well, they discovered hundreds upon hundreds of terracotta soldiers, complete with horses, chariots, officers, infantry, a court, I think even some bears, oh my. They discovered one of the world's greatest archaeological wonders, 2,000 terracotta soldiers in Qin Shi Huang's tomb. The tomb was built like this basically to serve as history's most impressive flex. Qin Shi Huang wanted to make it good and clear that even in death, he held more might and more power than anyone could ever imagine. You know that saying, you can't take it with you? Well, he wanted to take it with him. He wanted his own army to serve him in the afterlife. The wild part about this is we don't even know how far it goes, since it still hasn't fully been uncovered even all these years later. Those thousands of terracotta soldiers might just be the first wave of guys. While he reigned, Qin Shi Huang wanted to make very sure that his tomb was a good approximation of his legacy, so thousands of laborers worked tirelessly for decades to create an emperor's tomb. They think that 700,000 laborers worked on this for 40 years. That's already unbelievable, but Qin Shi Huang only even lived to be 49, so good thing they got that done in time, eh? Qin Shi Huang himself is buried beneath an enormous pyramid mound that stands a good distance away from the rest of the tomb. Now here's where the haunted part starts to come in. According to historians, this central tomb contains treasures and wondrous objects he attained during his life, including a flowing river of pure mercury, which doesn't really sound like the greatest idea, but back then they thought that made you immortal. Soil testing the nearby areas does have elevated levels of mercury, so that might actually be true. No one is too eager to check though, since it sounds like Qin Shi Huang kitted this place out to keep any would-be Nathan Drakes or Lara Crofts from raiding this uncharted tomb. It's said that it's got ancient ballistas and all sorts of traps, like mechanisms that'll fire arrows at potential grave robbers, and hey, that mercury vapor probably isn't doing you any favors, so don't try to breathe that in. In any case, the Chinese government has been in no rush to explore what's down there. It's best to let the sleeping dead lie, especially when the sleeping dead has thousands of personal bodyguards, and it's probably haunted, let's be real. Number 2, Snake Island. Our next entry, Isla de Quimada Grande, is formally dubbed as Snake Island, which really should tell you right off the bat that whatever I'm about to describe is not a friendly place. Traditionally, places are only named things like Snake Island if they're like, you know, filled to bursting with snakes, or if they're home to like a snake-themed supervillain or something. I'm pretty sure the guys who fought G.I. Joe lived on Snake Island. Anyway, Snake Island is called that because by conservative estimates, there's roughly a snake for every square meter of the island, meaning there's anywhere from 4,000 golden lancehead vipers or more living there. There's more snakes than there are people, and that's because most Brazilian locals know way better than to go to an island where one of the most venomous snakes on the planet live. Yeah, I left that part out. Well, I'm talking about it now. It's not just like garter snakes slithering about here. Isla de Quimada Grande is home to the golden lancehead, a beautiful creature in its own right that just happens to be one of the most lethal bites to humans. A bite from this snake can cause, let's list off some fun side effects, kidney damage, necrosis, brain hemorrhaging, venom poisoning, and oh, my favorite, internal intestinal damage. So just leave them alone. Even if for some bizarre reason I've told you all of that and you just love going to places you're not meant to and you're just dying for a chance to go visit venomous Snake Island, you are going to run into a bit of trouble because it's literally forbidden. The Brazilian government strictly monitors those who travel. Naval forces do visit annually to maintain the lighthouse, and there's a research station to study and analyze the local population, but all of these visits are accompanied by paramedics and trained doctors, just in case any of the locals decide to say hello the only way they know how. Am I the only one who thinks the golden lancehead is kind of cute, like in a little weird way? I don't want one as a pet, but I don't know, I think these danger noodles have very cute little eyes, but maybe that's just one of my red flags. And number 1, Poveglia. This list has not been pleasant. I guess I should have expected that, given the tone of all of these wretched, horrible, and haunted places. So let's close this list off and find somewhere nice and sunny to get away from all of life's woes. Maybe somewhere nice like, I don't know, Italy? Maybe somewhere off the coast of Venice, like the island of Poveglia? Now, Poveglia is an infamous island in Italian history. It once served as a quarantine zone and final resting place for victims of the Black Plague. You know that one. As the plague ravaged Europe and paranoia set in across the lands, it was said that anyone who showed so much as a symptom, you know, if you had a runny nose, they shipped you off to Poveglia to live out the rest of your days. Oftentimes, they would send people who weren't even really sick. You know, you just complain about a headache trying to get a day off work and you're on a longboat to the last island you're ever going to go to. It's said that over 50% of the island's soil is made of burned human ash. Let that set in for a second. The ground itself is haunted. In the early 19th century, the island converted from a quarantine zone to a mental asylum because I guess it thought that that wasn't scary enough. The asylum did not do much to improve Poveglia's reputation. Instead of being home to the sick, now it was home to droves of mentally unwell patients being made into victims via doctors' sick experiments. Cruel doctors at the asylum would impose their patients into lobotomies with no concern for sanitation or their safety, with chisels, drills, and rarely if ever using anesthetic. An old ghost story has it that the main doctor at the asylum was haunted by the spirits of his former patients and the crimes he'd committed, and it drove him to such madness that he cast himself off the bell tower of the island, where they say his screams can still be heard. Now, if I told you all of that and you still want to visit, first of all, why? And second of all, you're going to need to be pretty crafty, as it's totally completely forbidden. You will be pressed to the fullest extent of the law if you're caught trespassing, not even remotely worth the risk if you ask me. At best, you get arrested. At worst, haunted for the rest of your days.